Namaskar. In this episode of Dil Se, we'll talk about the current global situation in the context of the Israeli-US-Iran war that has actually disturbed the entire global order, destroyed the global order in a sense. We know that as far as Iran is concerned, since the 1980s, the United States has been wanting to ensure that Iran doesn't develop nuclear weapons. This is not the first time that attempts have been made to ensure that Iran does not have nuclear weapons. For years, ever since the 90s, no American president has allowed the United States to be dragged into a war and attack Iran. But when it came to President Trump, I think he changed his mind, perhaps goaded by the Israelis, and decided to take the plunge. And therefore, you know that in June 2025, the Americans attacked Iran, and Donald Trump proclaimed that the nuclear facilities had been destroyed and there was nearly nothing left and Iran could not develop nuclear weapons. All that he claimed way back in June 2025. And then, of course, suddenly, on February 28 of this year, he decided to directly attack Iran. Now, there is a background to all this. The background is that way back in the years 2009 onwards, 2013, 2015, attempts had been made by administrations to persuade Iran not to enrich the uranium that they possessed. And at some point in time, an agreement was reached. It's called the JCPOA. And in terms of that, countries joined in that effort. And it was agreed that Iran would not enrich the uranium that they possess beyond 3.67%. But this happened in 2015. Then in 2018, when President Trump became the president of the United States, he tore up that agreement for reasons that we can discuss. And therefore, Iran decided that, look, we had agreed that we'll not enrich uranium, but now that they don't want that agreement to go ahead, they decided to enrich the uranium. The result was that the Iranians possessed enriched uranium up to 60%. And that gave an excuse to the Americans, and perhaps goaded by the Israelis, to attack Iran on February 28, 2026. Iran, as we know, applied a very interesting strategy by reacting, retaliating, and made it difficult for the United States to win an all-out war, despite the fact that Trump claimed that he would ensure that Iran returns back to the Stone Age. So, to discuss the ramifications of this conflict and what's happening today, because as you know, there was a ceasefire. A delegation was sent to Pakistan, led by J.D. Vance, and that attempt to resolve the issue failed. And now we are hearing that there's another delegation that's going to go because the ceasefire is going to expire. So we'll discuss many of these issues, but we have a fascinating guest who's going to discuss this with me. He happens to be Kanwal Sibal. Thank you very much for being here. You were Foreign Secretary July 2002 to 2003 when Parliament was attacked, I believe. And you've served for 41 years, holding key positions, ambassador to Turkey, deputy chief of mission to the United States, to Washington, ambassador to Egypt, ambassador to France, finally after retirement, ambassador to Russia. And after that, you've been from 2008 to 2010, member of the National Security Advisory Board, a member of the National Foundation, U.S.-India Strategic Partnership Forum as an advisor. You received an award from the President of France in 2004 as the Grand Officer of the National Order of Merit, one of France's highest distinctions, in recognition of your contributions while serving as Indian ambassador. In 2017, you received Padma Shri Award. And in 2017, you were decorated by the Russians, with the Russian foreign minister, with an award for contributions to international cooperation. You're a prolific writer, a commentator, written 700 op-eds. And your recent comments on this conflict, we'll talk about this a little later, but thank you very much. I want to ask you a fundamental question here, and we'll start that with the fact that it is a fact that the Israelis have a nuclear weapon. Israelis have nuclear warheads to the extent of 50 to 80. At the moment, it could be increased to 100. And they were held by France way back in the Negev desert. And at that point in time, as you know, that the Israelis have not signed the NPT. So at that time, it was Ben Gurion who was in power in Israel. And I remember that JFK wrote to Ben Gurion saying that we believe that you are developing nuclear weapons and very worried about it. And he sent a delegation to Negev. And inspections were done, but the Israelis called it a research facility. So if the Israelis have a nuclear weapon, and they say they have it because of security reasons, why can't Iran have a nuclear weapon?
Logically, yes. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. And it's a very pertinent discussion because the world is facing a crisis because of this conflict. The ramifications of these are very wide-ranging. And if this conflict goes on, the entire world economy can be upended. Not to mention, actually, the possibility of it developing into some kind of a third world war even. Anyway, with regard to Israel's nuclear weapon, it is an open secret that they possess it, although they have never accepted that they have nuclear weapons. Iran has signed the NPT.
Yes.
And they have, therefore, under the NPT, observed all the obligations that the NPT imposes. Under the NPT, they have the right to enrich, because the NPT allows countries to develop nuclear capability for peaceful purposes. Yes. And enrichment is absolutely necessary to run power plants. Otherwise, how do you run nuclear power plants? The 3.67% limit is to ensure that you don't develop military-grade uranium, which can then be used for nuclear weapons. Now, you have actually described what has happened over the years with regard to Iran's nuclear program. In 2015, when Obama signed the JCPOA, all the P5 members were involved, plus Germany.
Yes.
It was a very intensive discussion, and you can actually see from the book that the former CIA chief, Bill Burns, wrote about the back channel and how he was involved.
Burns was involved in that.
In these negotiations. Yeah. And he's given in great detail how intensive these negotiations were. More than that, or in addition to this, since these are highly complex and technical issues, and it's not simply for diplomats to decide, so they had, the French, for example, had the head of their Atomic Energy Commission to participate in the complex discussions, and so did the United States. I don't know about others, whether Russia or Chinese were involved or not. In other words, it was a very, very carefully drafted document which foreclosed the possibility of Iran developing nuclear weapons. Now, Khamenei himself, the spiritual leader, had issued a fatwa that possession of nuclear weapons is against Islamic tenets.
Correct.
Now, as part of the JCPOA, the IAEA got extremely intrusive monitoring rights.
I believe 234 times it was monitored.
Exactly. And not only that, whatever the enriched uranium was in possession of Iran was handed over to the Russians.
Right.
At that time, if one were to read my article, because I wrote a couple of articles on this, and I said that I'm surprised at the degree to which the Iranians have agreed to compromise their sovereignty.
That's right.
Which they did. I genuinely believe that. India would never have accepted conditions like this.
Right.
Since then, all these inspections have gone on. There have been suspicions that there have been some undisclosed sites by Iran where some kind of experimentation may have gone on. The IAEA has demanded access. The Iranians had signed the additional protocol under which the IAEA gets extra inspection rights. All these were granted. And the IAEA has consistently said that there is no proof that Iran is developing a nuclear weapon, although they say there have been suspicious activities. As against this, Netanyahu, for years, has been targeting Iran's nuclear capability and its nuclear ambitions, to the point, if you go back to his speeches at the UN, at one of them, 3-4 years ago, at the UN podium, he presented a chart which showed that Iran was about to develop nuclear weapons in 1 month time or 2 months time. That is the last stage and everything else. So this kind of narrative has been gone on for years.
But he couldn't persuade any other American president to attack.
Obviously. Now, the point is this kind of narrative that Iran is on the verge of developing nuclear weapons has been going on for years.
That's correct.
But they have never actually given any proof that Iran has developed nuclear weapons. Now, you mentioned quite rightly that after the JCPOA was repudiated by Trump, Iran and all the sanctions were reimposed. Iran began to enrich uranium to higher levels. Now, 20% is important because for all your medical purposes, you need, for medical devices and all, you need enriched uranium up to 20%.
Right.
So that was justified on that basis. Now, as you rightly said, they have developed about 360 kilograms, whatever the figure is, up to 60%. And there's a method in this madness that since the other side has totally reneged on an agreement.
That's correct.
Number one. Number two, they have reimposed sanctions, and the Europeans played a very negative role in this, because in the UN Security Council resolution which approved the JCPOA, there was a clause which said that if Iran violates this agreement, then the sanctions on which they got relief will be reimposed. Now, the Europeans went ahead recently it was called snapback sanctions, contrary to the position of Russia and China, but they couldn't veto this because this was part of the earlier resolution.
I see.
So they had no legal basis to veto it. So it went ahead and they reimposed these sanctions. Now, the 60% thing is a lever that, to my mind, that Iran has. That, look, you have gone back on all your agreements.
That's correct.
We are going to put pressure on you and keep enriching up to 60% as they have done in order to force them into negotiations. Now, I'm saying this seriously because if you look at what happened during the mediation by Oman and what the Omani foreign minister publicly said in an interview to an American TV channel and later in The Economist, which is quite surprising.
They will never ever develop a
They asked him to write the article,
right.
The Omani foreign minister, to give his side of the story, in which, astonishingly, the Iranians agreed that the 60% enriched uranium can be drawn down to 3.67% and done it in a manner that it cannot be enriched again to any level.
Correct.
In other words, and even more surprisingly, that agreed to a regional facility to enrich uranium so that Iran doesn't have to enrich uranium itself. That regional facility will then provide uranium for the nuclear programs of the Gulf states.
Right.
Saudi Arabia has one, UAE has one, whatever. And Iran would have had access to this uranium. Now, these are remarkable concessions.
Right.
Remarkable concessions. Right. And if you relate this to what you just said, that Trump said that he had now obliterated Iran's nuclear capability, then why this attack?
Why 28th of February?
Why are they attacking Iran again?
But I believe in Oman also said in those negotiations that the Israelis had said that they will never ever develop nuclear weapons. This is what I'm told.
Yes. No, that of course, yes, you're right. Because this is a commitment that Khamenei had made.
Right.
I personally feel that Khamenei was dithering on this issue. He was in a double mind. At the end of the day, he was a responsible man. He wanted Iran for his pride and for his dignity and his national self-esteem to assert his right under the NPT, but at the same time, not develop a nuclear weapon. I've talked to Iranian diplomats, and not that what they told me I had to take as gospel truth.
Well, you've been to Iran, right?
I've been to Iran, but I have also met Aragchi and others.
Okay.
And they in fact told me, actually, we don't need nuclear weapons for our security, because if we develop nuclear weapons, then the neighboring countries will develop nuclear weapons too.
Right.
And how would that add to our security? To my mind, this war has been pushed by, you were a little hesitant and a little discreet about the Israeli role, but I think Netanyahu and Israel is squarely behind this. This has been his life's ambition, because maybe from a certain point of view, given the memory of the Holocaust and everything else.
But nobody talks about their nuclear weapons in this entire dialogue. Nobody talks about their nuclear weapons.
Exactly, because they're shielded by the Americans and the Europeans. They don't want to make this an issue.
Right.
So they're not under any pressure. There is absolutely no IAEA inspection of the Dimona nuclear reactor and their facilities. They've been shielded by the Americans. But from the Israeli point of view, for a moment, let's accept that they have this argument, although one can dispute it, that we are targeted by the proxies of Iran. There's Hamas and there is Hezbollah.
But what about the fact what they do to the Palestinians?
I was going to come to that.
Yes.
That therefore, and these fellows have the capacity, especially Hezbollah. They've got thousands of missiles and they can wreak havoc on Israel. And Iran is behind this. It has other proxies. It used to have other proxies in Syria. And therefore, there's a mortal threat, existential threat for Israel. And if Iran acquires nuclear weapons, that Israel loses the capability of attacking Iran.
Right.
And so does the United States, for that matter.
Yeah.
And therefore, for Israel, it's a no. Iran cannot have nuclear weapons, because Israel wants to keep the option open, and United States, to attack Iran if necessary. Now,
but the existential threat is to Iran.
Now, my argument, Kapil, is this: that let us for a moment agree that Iran has proxies and it is doing whatever it is doing to create turmoil in Israel, and a small country living constantly under threat of terror or whatever. Okay, let's accept that. But if Israel, during this period, had actually dealt with the Palestinians in a humane manner,
this would not have happened.
Moved towards a two-state solution, genuinely accepted their rights, then Iran would have been squarely at fault.
I agree.
That Israelis are behaving like decent people. They are giving the Palestinians all the rights they want. They are working steadily towards a two-state solution. But on the contrary, what have they done?
Recently, 32 new settlements. 32 new settlements.
Not only that, in the Oslo Accords, the agreement was that West Jerusalem would be the capital of a newly created Palestinian state. But they surrounded West Jerusalem with settlements. So physically it was not possible for it to be. And what had the Americans did, they shifted their embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And then the settlements in the West Bank. And then, of course, the manner in which they have treated the Gazans, 70,000 people killed.
72,000 people killed,
now,
yes.
Therefore, in that sense, like you are a lawyer, you know that if you want justice, you have to come with clean hands. Now, if Israel wants to have justice, it has to have clean hands. It doesn't have clean hands.
Right.
Whether Iran doesn't have clean hands is a separate issue.
Well, let's see a situation in which Iran doesn't have nuclear weapons. Then the expansionism of Israel, they're an expansionist country, right? They want to take hold of southern Lebanon. They want to expand up to Oman, right? So I think that they will then dominate this area, and which is what exactly they want. Is that, do you think that can be
Of course.
the
It's so
intent?
obvious. The Abraham Accords are founded on this thought that Israel becomes a part of the region and backed by the United States. It will then dominate the region.
And control the oil eventually,
Well,
especially in the
that's a
context
little
of their
more-
relations with the
That's a little
Saudis.
more complicated, but in terms of what you talked about, Israeli expansionism, which is real, because the leaders in power today are messianic. They derive their logic and their claim from the Bible, from the river to the sea, which means from the Nile River to the Jordan River. That is what biblical land. It was promised to them
That's
by
what
Moses.
he keeps on saying in his speeches.
Moses, yeah. So, and they're not shy about saying that. And they treat some of their leaders, Smotrach and others, their finance minister, another minister, they are very, I mean, they openly say that the Palestinians are animals, they're not human beings, etc., etc. So, we are at the cusp of a situation today that is very, 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 very dangerous.
But tell me this, this impacts, in fact, it's changed the global order according to me, because the Europeans are not on board with the United States of America at this point in time. The Europeans are also very unhappy with Israel. They have an agreement with Israel, defense agreement of 2000. They want to suspend it. There's 1 million signatures that have recently been taken.
Italy has suspended it, yeah.
Italy has that. Spain is against this war. European relations with the US there's been a transformation in that relationship. In the meantime, the Gulf countries are very unhappy because the facilities that were built by the United States in those Gulf countries, according to the Iranians, are used to attack them. Therefore, Iran has attacked the Gulf countries. So there's a problem there. And Pakistan is their neighbor. There's a big problem with Pakistan. China is sitting pretty. Russia, too, is sitting pretty. In this context, what's going to happen to the new global order?
Look, the repercussions of what is happening are extremely dangerous. For this reason, that especially given the personality of Trump, he always wants to win. And he defines himself what that win is. Now, if he agrees to terms which then can be reasonably analyzed as United States and Trump not getting his way, then is a huge problem for him. So he can't afford a solution in which he is not the clear winner. Now, for Iran, it's an existential threat because twice they've seen, as you, in your introductory remarks, you pointed out, twice during the course of negotiations, they've gone and attacked Iran. Right. So they are using the threat to attack, including the threat that we will bomb you back to the Stone Age, and then saying that we'll wipe your civilization entirely. Look at the terms that are being used. Now, they cannot have any trust in the United States and Trump in particular. So if they agree to something, what is the guarantee that this will be upheld by the United States? So for them, it's a fight to the finish. And therefore, at the moment, their how should I say, strategy, which I think will be difficult to implement, is to make sure that the American presence is excluded from the region. That's the logic behind attacking their bases.
Yeah.
And America, look at this. He talks about it being the biggest military power in the world and everything. He couldn't protect his bases.
It's true.
He had to vacate those bases. Military personnel in those bases had to seek shelter in hotels. Some of those hotels were also attacked by the Iranians. And then, mind you, even in the oil, Aramco and whichever the oil energy facilities in the Gulf countries, American companies have a very, very large share.
That's right.
Exxon has 30% in the Saudi oil complex.
So that's why the Saudis are very worried. They made a very strong statement the other day.
I don't know the figure about UAE, but Exxon and BP have huge shares.
That's right.
So, therefore, Iran can well argue, you decapitated our leaders. Look at that also.
I know we are going to cut to that.
Utter violation of international law.
That's right. But we didn't even talk about it.
So they decapitated their leadership. Not only the top leadership, 40 people at the top levels of the armed forces and all have been killed. And now they've killed Kamal Kharazi.
That's right.
I feel personally a bit upset about, well, upset is a strong word. I feel sorry about this because I'm a member of the Leaders for Peace, which is an organization which promotes peace led by a former French Prime Minister. And Kamal Kharazi was part member of that, along with Blinken when you didn't, before he became Secretary of State. And I've interacted with Kamal Kharazi. They've killed him. A very reasonable man, but they've killed him. Anyway, so they have attacked their bases. They have attacked their other economic,
but they have not been able to win the war.
Economic assets to make it untenable for them. And now there's a debate within the Gulf countries whether these bases were a source of security or insecurity. And they have come to realize, and more people are saying, it's a source of insecurity.
Naturally, yes.
And then the other grouse they have is, of course, you see the United States has limited Patriot missiles and everything else. So once the Iranians unleashed their missiles and drones, they wanted to protect Israel. So they moved many of these anti-air defense systems to protect Israel. And now the Gulf countries are saying, you've chosen Israel over us. There's another grouse that they have. But they have a problem. And from a certain point of view, it's a genuine problem. Supposing they tell the Americans, please go away. How do they become less vulnerable to Iran? Then they're accepting Iranian hegemony. I mean, they
can't afford to do that.
They're shedding U.S. hegemony, but accepting Iranian hegemony. They can't even do that. So they're caught in a very difficult situation. They have nowhere to go in terms of their future security. Pakistan can have this agreement with Saudi Arabia, but Pakistan is so worried that Saudi Arabia may invoke this
defense
agreement. So they are sort of doing somersaults to make sure that some dialogue continues and some kind of a...
Recently, Shahbaz Sharif just went to Saudi Arabia.
Yes. But because also they want loans and everything else. Because
they are in great difficulty.
So many people who think that Pakistan has stolen a march over us are actually reading the situation very, very wrongly. A couple of things. One is that Pakistan is deeply, deeply worried. As I said, that if this continues, and if tomorrow Iran starts actively attacking the Saudi energy facilities, and Saudi strikes back, because they have capability of striking back.
They have said so.
They're not doing it for the time being. UAE has done it, but then they'll invoke the defense agreement. And what does Pakistan do? 30% Shia population, neighbor country of Iran, they have exchanged missile attacks between each other.
A great problem
so
Pakistan.
They have to be active for their own salvation, if you like. And number two, the Iranians...
But they have certainly earned the goodwill of the Iranians by being active. That is certain.
I'll come to that. For the Iranians, they are so mortified that they may be killed. They have to feel very secure if they travel, right? And the safest place they can go is next door. So they've gone to Pakistan. They can't go to the Gulf countries. They can't go to Europe. They can't go to Vienna. They can't go to Switzerland. So Pakistan is the obvious country.
That's right.
And of course, as you know, in the Muslims, it's the culture. Embrace each other, brother. But this is all show of diplomacy. Frankly, I don't think there is that much love lost between Iran and Pakistan. Though, of course, they're neighboring countries, and reality demands that they have a workable...
But what about Europe and the US? This, of course, is... What about... what's going to happen there?
See, a couple of things. First, that the European leaders were very active in interfering in the election against Trump. People like Starmer and others actually were active on the ground in mobilizing public opinion against a Trump win. So Trump hasn't forgotten that. Number one. Number two, Trump has this belief that the US has provided security to Europe over the years, paid most of the cost. The Europeans have basked under this American umbrella, spent money on building their economy, established a strong economy, and started actually exporting to USA and having a large surplus. So
Therefore, must spend 5% of their GDP on defense.
that is in order to make sure that they concentrate more on spending money and buying American arms rather than on their economy.
That's right.
Right? And also, of course, the Europeans have done a terrible mistake in cutting themselves off from Russian oil and this is part of the American game. The sanctions were imposed by Biden, so they went whole hog for that, joined entirely the strategy of the Biden administration. And then you saw Biden openly said that he's going to blow off the Nord Stream pipeline, which was done, and now they have to buy American gas. If you remember, Trump in his first term, he went to Poland, and he said, why do you have to buy Russian gas? I can supply you LNG and I can build terminals for you, etc. They've always had this mind. This is part of his baby drill. That he wants to, he knows that America doesn't have much reserves. He wants to get hold of reserves. That's why he's got
Venezuela. Yeah.
So, but whatever reserves, whatever they can produce now, shale and everything else, firstly, it's costly. Second, there are no reserves of the kind that others have. So he wants to sell as much as possible. So his buddies are making a lot of money. This is another angle. If the oil prices go up,
he makes money.
He makes a lot of money.
They can't supply, so he'll have to supply.
He makes his supporters a lot of money.
But he recently made a statement that, once we get rid of these Iranians, we take the oil fields.
He said that.
He's made that
like in the case of Venezuela.
That's right.
No, but look at the cheek of the man. He says, look, Strait of Hormuz, we can jointly manage it. And
we'll charge rent. We'll charge rent.
We'll have tolls and we can make a lot of money. I wonder how Iranians can deal with a man like that.
If the Americans are really interested in these peace talks, I don't know what's going to happen in the second round, but at least, and that was what Pakistan said, the understanding was that the Israelis are not going to attack Lebanon. But they are continuing to attack.
Yeah,
and the Americans can't sort of pull them back.
Firstly, Trump personally is hugely indebted to the Jewish financiers. If you remember, when he went to Tel Aviv, there was this lady, I've forgotten her name, an American Jewess, and who's contributed $500 million to his campaign. And he recognized her in the audience. And he said, maybe I shouldn't ask you this question, but do you consider yourself an American or an Israeli? And everybody laughed and stuff like that. So he's beholden to that lobby. So his margin for maneuver is limited.
But how long will it last? Because the gas prices in the US have reached $6.
I was coming to that. On one hand, the oil companies gain a lot. On the other hand, the pump prices are very sensitive in terms
of... Food prices have gone up.
Also, the secondary, tertiary effect of all that. And this is sensitive in terms of politics.
Yes.
And with the midterm elections,
November, the election.
He has to keep the oil prices. That's why they gave a waiver that you can buy Iranian oil, you can buy Russian oil. Now he's saying no more waivers and stuff like that.
And this blockade that he has done.
Totally confused. There's no strategy.
But Kanwal, this blockade he has done is going to be worse for him. Because
exactly.
Much worse. It'll be counterproductive.
But he has said that he's going to lift the blockade for China. He said that there will be no more blockade.
That's when he goes to China.
He said, I'm lifting the blockade for China. So the Chinese can come and go. But the blockade is lifted for all transport of non-Iranian oil.
Yes.
But Iranian oil will not be allowed.
That's correct.
So he blows hot and cold. He's totally confused.
No. And the thing is...
I don't think he has a coherent strategy. He doesn't have a coherent strategy. Now, you talked about the second round of negotiations and this and that. First of all, it's my view that fielding J.D. Vance was a big mistake. After all, beyond that is the president himself.
That's correct.
Now, you send a top man like that.
But they also... Ghalibaf is also the number 2 in Iran.
The speaker.
Yeah.
Now, then you have to prepare the ground at the negotiators level so that when the top man comes, you already have the broad features of an agreement in place and only 1 or 2 sensitive issues on which you know in advance that there is scope for compromise. because you're not going to get into this situation if it's not going to work. And for Vance, with his presidential ambitions, to enter this fray and come away without success damages his prospects and his reputation. Now, if Vance has not succeeded, and this is another angle, and they send somebody else, and he succeeds, it's hugely embarrassing for Vance.
True.
And for his political career.
No, he's going to go again. That's what they're saying.
He will say that, no, he won't go. He will say, look, I mean, the other chap is smarter than him. He was able to persuade the Iranians. And Vance, despite the goodwill he had because he was against the war, didn't succeed. And now, of course, there's another controversy about the Pope in which Vance has put his foot in. And I think that's going to damage him. But on the second round, look, at the conversations, at the mediation that Oman did, Iran had, to my mind, conceded everything that was need to be conceded. Now, I can't see anything more being conceded.
No, they're saying that, look, they say 20 years ban, and Iran says 5 years on the nuclear front. On the enrichment front, that 5-year ban, they say no, 20-year ban. That's what.
Yeah, but
that's the sticking point, according to the American press.
This is what the papers say.
Yes.
But one day, Omani negotiator, the foreign minister, publicly says that Iran had agreed to hand over its entire enriched uranium stockpile, dilute it to 3.67%, and make it unusable in terms of any highly enriched uranium prospects. And then that you can have a common facility for providing fuel for nuclear reactors for all countries, which you need enriched uranium. What more is needed? What is this 10 and 5 years? There is a view, I don't know if this is correct or not, that Trump wants to be able to say that, for me, the nuclear issue was most important. Therefore,
that's what he's saying.
He wants the nuclear issue to be in the forefront. Even if there is an agreement on the nuclear issue, on all issues, he wants to highlight the nuclear issue to claim that, look, I said that I'm going to prevent them from acquiring nuclear weapons, and I said I've succeeded. So he's making the nuclear issue central to this entire strategy, when actually, if you look at what has happened earlier, the nuclear issue is not the real issue.
Yes, because they already conceded to it.
Yeah, the real issue is what America's intentions are.
Exactly.
What are their intentions?
And along with Israel, what they want to
Exactly,
do, that
exactly,
reason. That reason. But now they are saying, and that the new conversation that's taking place is that the 60% enriched uranium will be handed over and kept outside the country.
Right. This is what Vance is saying.
That's what Vance is, kept outside the country. And then you can start with the 3.6%, 6-7%. Well, that's also would be acceptable to Iran.
To my mind, yeah, I agree with you. I think if push came to shove, and this was the only sticking point, and on everything else, which I don't believe is possible, the Iranians were satisfied that the Americans were being genuine, and they're going to lift all sanctions. Not only UN sanctions, but the sanctions.
And also the assets, $28 billion of assets.
Assets, they release all those assets, this and that. I think the Iranians earlier on had handed over their stockpile to Russia. They'll do it again. And Russia will be able to persuade them. I don't think that will be the sticking point.
But no one say no missiles for you. This is the other thing.
Now, this is the thing, that earlier on in the JCPOA, the Americans tried very hard to bring in both development of missiles as well as the regional role of Iran. The Iranians had nothing doing.
Yes.
Nothing doing. Now, again, this has come into the negotiations.
Then they'd be defenseless if they agree to that.
Exactly. They've said that we can't have an air force.
Yes.
So the only defense we have is missiles. So you want to render us defenseless. Iran will never accept that.
Yes.
And as for regional role, if I was Iranian, I would say, well, first look at Israel's regional role, and let's look at you as your regional role. You curb your regional roles, and I can curb mine. So, I mean, what's the argument that you have free hand to
The argument
have
is
a
I have
regional
the
role?
power, I have the military power, I can decide what I like. The laws will be laid by me. Exactly. The terms of settlement will be decided by me.
Exactly.
That's what it is.
Yeah, but Iran is It's too proud a country. Remember, Iran has never been colonized.
That's true.
So their mentality is a bit different.
That's true. But tell me, in this Strait of Hormuz issue, because this is also a very, it's a legal issue as well as an emotive issue. They say that, look, a part of it is with Oman and part of it is with us, because the width of the Strait of Hormuz is about
20, 25 or whatever it is.
Right? So they say that, look, then these are our internal waters, so we are entitled to charge a toll. And the fact is that you've destroyed Iran. How will they recoup? The only way for reparations is for each ship that passes, it pays a toll, because they've been attacked without any cause.
But Kapil, to my mind, there is a flaw in this logic. But let me go back a little bit. Under UNCLOS, the Strait of Hormuz, as well as the legal basis of operations, maritime operations in all the states, is in the UNCLOS document. And Hormuz Strait is also there.
Yeah.
And it's very specifically said that it is freedom of passage, everything else, etc.
That's part of maritime law. That's why I said the legal issue is clear.
No. Other thing is that it has no relevance to Suez Canal or Panama Canal or anything else, because those are, on each side of those canals, there is sovereign territory.
That's right.
In this case, Iran is only one coastal state. Now, you mentioned Oman, and that is a flaw in the Iranian argument. I'll tell you why they're doing this. There is UAE and there is Qatar. They're also coastal states. So you can't disregard their rights over this. Now, what the Iranians are saying, that the deep water channels through which these ships pass are either in the Iranian territorial waters or in the Omani territorial waters. And therefore, they have a right. But this is contrary to the UNCLOS. But the interesting thing in this is that when Iran signed the UNCLOS, it did not ratify it. So
Americans have also not ratified it.
They've also not
ratified it.
Now, and they also added a very specific reservation, because under UNCLOS, there is a right of free passage of military ships. And Iran said no. And from their point of view, absolutely rightly. Then you are giving an opening to American warships to ply up and down the Strait of Hormuz, as they've been doing in the past. So they had actually put in a very strong reservation. So there are legal arguments on the part of Iran. But the broader picture is that they cannot say that international waterways, as described in the UNCLOS document, even if Iran has not signed it, ratified it, means that they can exercise. So as far as the toll is concerned, Kapil, why should we pay the price for American folly?
No, I'm not. I'm only saying.
I'm just saying that the Iranian position.
They are in their negotiating position. One of the grounds, one of the 10 points of Iran is that, look, we must get reparations.
That's from the Americans.
But how do the Americans will not agree to it? You know that.
Then why should India or China or Japan or South Korea pay reparations for what Americans and the Israelis have done?
You're right, but the question is in this very unjust war, somebody must
but when it's being unjust to us, let's say
it's true,
India,
it is true.
In fact,
I think if you ask me, Americans have been very unjust to us because the impact of the war on this part of the world is much greater.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Look at the economic impact, look at the LPG. Right?
I agree.
Look at the lines. You're not going to get oil for a long period of time because the ships that was launched earlier, before the war, they are now reaching their destinations. In between, the ships have not launched.
The other thing
therefore, they'll reach in 3-4 months. Then what's going to happen?
There are a couple of issues there. One is that since the ships are blocked, which means that no more ships can come in to load oil. If they can't load oil, then you can't keep producing oil because there's no storage.
Exactly.
Now,
and the cost of insurance, the cost of
that is an additional point.
That's the additional point.
But the point is that in order to restart production, you have to get rid of the stocked oil also.
Correct.
That cannot be rid of unless the ships move.
Ships go,
so there's going to be a shortage of oil.
Yes.
Number two, countries have depleted their strategic stocks by 40%, 60% or whatever the figure is. Now, their first thing would be to replenish their stocks, which means that the demand for oil will go up. and there'll be a mismatch, and the price of oil will
course.
continue to be high. But coming back to this toll business, even China is not supporting this. India is not
No,
supporting
no, nobody
this.
will support it. But why should they? Why should they? Of course, nobody will support it. But the fact of the matter is that this is an unjust war,
Yeah,
and somebody has to pay the cost for it.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
And
But
from the Iranian standpoint, there is no other way.
well, one way is this, that of course it's murder for us if the price of oil remains at $100 and Iran is allowed to sell its oil. Then they'll make a lot of money.
That's true.
So they
No, they also made a lot of money in between because the price had gone up and they were exporting. So they made the money. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been
The
able to
Russians are also making a lot of money.
Right.
So can Iran. And some other way can be found, I don't know, the World Bank, IMF loans, ADB, whatever. Some way can be found to help Iran.
I can tell you that unless the two-nation theory is accepted by the Israelis, this will never be resolved. Because the Iranians will never give up.
Well, I told the Iranians once quite seriously, and people who are today negotiating, I talked to them at that time. And I said, look, you're making it very difficult for countries like India and others to support you to the hilt because of the position you are taking on Israel. You are the only one who's saying that Israel doesn't have the right
The
to
others,
exist.
of course, have collaborated.
Arab countries, the Palestinian Arabs, the Arabs are not saying that. Why do you take this position? And I said, look, how old is Israel? Created in 1940.
Because the Palestinians supported them at one point.
True. But I said Israel was created in 48. You are 2,000-3,000 year old civilization. Your existence doesn't depend on the existence of Israel. Therefore, if you were to modify your position, you can be opposed to what Israel is doing. But this constant refrain that
What
Israel,
was his response?
I tell you privately.
Okay. But I think the global...
One response was this, what you've just said.
Okay.
That when the revolution was in infant stages and the communists were actually battling for taking control of Israel, and the revolution of Khamenei was in danger, the PLO sent its people on the ground to provide security. That was one reason he gave me, but there were one or two others too.
But anyway, in this whole conflict, I think China is sitting pretty.
Yes.
And has enhanced its global image, according to me.
It is a gainer for several reasons. First, that America is weakening itself. America is losing ground in the Middle East. As you know, Saudi Arabia and China have a massive relationship.
That's true.
Iran and China have a massive...
I went to Saudi, I went to Riyadh recently. The kind of investment the Chinese have made is unbelievable.
Iran and China have a 25-year-old agreement. UAE and others have been turning towards China because China is a huge importer of oil. Yes. And therefore, they have a vested interest in keeping these markets open, especially with the renewable energy and everything else. They know that time is limited. Yes. And these big consuming countries are assets which they have to cultivate, including India. So number two, China, US loses ground in the Middle East. Number three, China, by comparison, looks far more reliable, statesman-like, mature.
Yeah.
Even when they threatened Taiwan, they never go to this extent in doing some of the things the Iranians are, the US is doing. So, since they have now a lot of clout in the United Nations and in the global South, therefore they will gain diplomatic ground in the non-West part of the world. And then they have launched all these initiatives: global governance, global development, global civilization initiative, global this, global that, which is resonating. Contrary to the discourse of the Americans. And if you look at Trump, the kind of thing he says.
No, he's withdrawing from international organizations.
Exactly. So you're right, China is a big gainer.
What about Russia?
Russia, but let me come back to this. But China has also lost. China had invested, I forget the figure, it's $20 or $40 billion in Venezuela, which they have lost.
That's true.
And now with the American domination of the Western Hemisphere, the Monroe Doctrine and Monroe Doctrine. Look at Panama Canal. They've taken the thing away from China. Now with Iran, China, in a sense, has lost because they had 25
relying on China. Iranian oil comes to them, yes, of course.
No, also they had a 25-year agreement.
That's right.
And if you see the statements of Chinese, they're very cautious. They're not giving full support to Iran.
No.
And on the issue of the Strait of Hormuz, they say there should be no impediment in terms of free
naturally, because they want the oil.
Yeah. So China has largely gained, but not entirely. But Russia has lost in Venezuela. Russia has been hit in Iran. These were two countries which are very friendly to Russia and in the Russian orbit. There was the international North-South corridor in which we were also interested in everything else. Russia was building nuclear power plants. They're building one. They agreed to build another one, etc. So they have lost. Russia has lost in Syria also because the Assad regime is no longer there. So Russia, in fact, Russia was asked, Putin was asked directly this question. There's a feeling you've not helped Iran. And he said, what do you mean by help? Do you mean that I should get into a war with the United States? We are involved in Ukraine. We have helped Iran. We fully support their peaceful nuclear power program, and we'll continue to support that. And there's other ways we've helped them. So he gave a very balanced view that if you want me to help Iran confront the United States and myself get it.
He said no, yes. In fact, he was asked the question, have you supplied any arms or this thing? And he said no.
So we have supplied intelligence information, whatever else. They must have given some help. No, but a few months ago, I have seen myself to Putin's interview. This is we mentioned this attack in June 2025. That time Putin was asked. He says, I was willing to offer them help, but the Iranians refused my offer.
Okay.
Because the Iranians want to be self-sufficient. But to answer your question, I think, yes, Russia too has lost, though indirectly with the oil prices up. The situation has been eased.
I think the Americans have lost, lost respect to the rest of the world with the nature of their diplomacy. The Europeans have lost. The Gulf countries have lost. Iran, of course, has lost. China too has gained in prestige but lost economically. Russia has lost. And India has lost the most. So next time I meet you, we'll talk about India.
But on India, I've been making the point, and I don't mind making this point again, that not that the Americans or the Israelis had India in mind, but the consequences of this for us are the most severe.
That's right.
China doesn't have 10 million people.
Exactly.
And China doesn't need remittances, which we are getting $40 billion.
$36 billion.
We'll be getting from this
6%,
region.
China, we have not so many, 90 million people in those countries.
No, we have 3.67 million people in the UAE alone. Yes. So we've been hit hard because we are so highly energy dependent.
9 million, not 90.
85, 88% of energy. So, but this is the misfortune. What to do? This is our misfortune.
We'll talk about that next time. Thanks. Thank you very much.
Okay.